To today's CMA Confab, the State of the Profession. I'm Bill Danone, Vice President of Member Training for CMA. I'd especially like first up foremost to thank Mike Breslin, CMA's Executive Director, and his colleagues at Capitol Hill Management Services, without whose diligent help and support, CMA could not deliver its many member services like these confabs. Today, I'm pleased to present 5 leaders in the college media space. Jackie Alexander, President of College Media Association; Glenda Ballas, Board President of the Broadcast Education Association; Ashanti Blaze Hopkins, President of the Society of Professional Journalists; Elizabeth Smith, President of the Associated Collegiate Press; and Alan Vaughn, President of the College Media Business and Advertising Managers. These panelists will offer their perspectives on the state of the college media advising profession, and I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves further and set the stage with some opening remarks. Afterward, they'll field some questions from us, and you may place your questions in the chat below at any time. So that said, I'm going to ask Jackie Alexander first to start with some opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Alexander. I serve as the current president of the College Media Association. We serve over 500 media advisors across the country, including Hawaii and Puerto Rico. I'm really grateful to be here today. I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation. As I was telling our panelists right before we got started, that during a lot of the layoffs that were happening in the early spring, late winter, that I saw a tweet from an advisor who said, I'm debating the ethics of continuing to encourage my students to go into this field. And that really resonated with me as an advisor myself, thinking about, okay, what I want our students to be successful after graduation. How do I make sure that that happens? And seeing what's happening in our larger field, both on the collegiate media side and the professional media side, I thought that this conversation needed to happen. So thinking about what we are seeing on both the collegiate media and professional media side, there are a couple of concerns that I, honestly have. First and foremost is finances. We know that in higher education, because our budgets are tied directly to our institutions, for most of us, we know that we are approaching an enrollment cliff. We know that we are dealing with the ramifications of COVID-19 and the financial losses there. Those impact our ability to run our own shops and provide for our students as they move forward through their education. I think another thing that is a challenge is engagement. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different advisors, including Alan, who he and I talk, honestly, every every 2 weeks or so. How do we get our students engaged in a meaningful way? When I was in undergrad, I lived at the Daily Gamecock at the University of South Carolina. And right now, what we're seeing after COVID-19 is our students that aren't really engaged. They aren't really, taking up the mantle, that they're presenting with a lot of mental health issues, that they are just, they're not connecting in the ways that we may have seen when we were undergraduate students ourselves. And then again, finally, I think one of the other challenges that I think CMA and all of our leaders need to take up is mental health for our students. I know that is a huge challenge at my own campus at UAB at University of Alabama at Birmingham. We are seeing students presenting with not just more issues, but more complex issues. Previously, we had seen advisors say, I'm really focused on just the work, just what they're doing for the newspaper or whatever organization they're working for. But we really need to think about our students holistically, because they're whole people and that come to work for us. Um, and they are experiencing levels of trauma and levels of challenges, whether it's food insecurity, housing insecurity, that we've never seen before. So those are my opening statements.
Okay, and I'll invite Elizabeth Smith, please, with Associated Collegiate Press.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's just afternoon here on the West Coast, so good afternoon officially to all of us. I wanted to say thank you to Jackie and Bill and Mike in particular at CMA for hosting this conversation and inviting me to be a part of it. I'm a proud member of CMA, but I'm here as the ACP president. I'm also the director of Pepperdine Graphic Media here at Pepperdine. And one of the advisors. And I think this conversation is so important. Let me rephrase that. I think these conversations are so important. It's going to take a lot of voices in these conversations to start to really think about how we continue to maneuver this space. One of the things that we think a lot about here with our students, I think the students who come our way and are participating in Pepperdine Graphic Media here and our alumni who leave, they really still understand and value the mission of journalism and still get excited about it. But I think what obstacles that are continuing to grow is the lack of trust, just generally, that campus journalists, all journalists are having to deal with in new and escalating ways. The responsibility in news deserts, and I do consider where we are a news desert. What our students are doing is not just really important for our campus, it's really important for our communities, all of the communities that we serve. And also just this need, if journalism is going to weather these storms of trust and financial instability, bringing in a wider swath of students who are interested in tech and finance, so that we're not training students who want to be reporters don't have to be the finance people, don't have to be the tech people. Let's open those doors a little wider and make everyone see that there's an exciting place to get to plug in your talents and to grow and innovate. So I'm really excited. My background, I've worked in broadcast, social, print. I love all of it. And I try to bring that to my work. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Thank you all.
Oh, and it's my turn. Glenda Ballas from the Broadcast Education Association. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate your including BEA as a part of this, and I'm just delighted to be here. So I am president of BEA. I'm a full professor of communication at the University of North Texas at Dallas. My most immediate background is as a professor. I was a dean of arts and sciences at UNT Dallas for 6 years, was an interim provost. I was chair of communication and journalism at the University of New Mexico and chair of mass communication at Sam Houston State. So I was in this writing workshop, and so we all had to go around and say something about ourselves. And so I defined myself in the way I just talked to you. And so the facilitator said, "Oh, so you are a proper academic." And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess I am." But what I want to bring forward today is that I didn't get started in this business as an academic. My first job out of the undergraduate degree was to be part of a founding team that put KNW TV FM on the air. And so then for the next 15 years, I worked at KNW and KCTS in Seattle in doing a range of things, including fundraising. Whenever I first started at KNW, one of the focus points for us was putting a newscast on the air. Portales, New Mexico is this tiny university town that's about 120 miles from Lubbock and about 100 miles from Roswell. So it's out there in the middle of the plains. And there was we felt insufficient news that was available to people in eastern New Mexico and West Texas. And so we put together this newscast, even though our equipment wasn't the greatest as we were first putting the station up. And we had all these students come, and they all wanted to be a part of it. And they, auditioned and they wrote and they were on the air. It was a really exciting time for all of us. Then in the mid-'80s, I was the development director for this station. I did some other work, came back. And every year I raised $50,000 to keep the newscast on the air. And it was a nightly show. We had full-time news director. And again, we had students out the door auditioning, wanting to be on the air, wanting to write, wanting to edit. I was recently at KNW, the death of Dwayne Ryan. I don't know if any of you knew him. He's a really wonderful station manager. Went over to attend his service. And what I found out was that even though they had a brand new building, beautiful state-of-the-art facility, that was all they could do to maintain 2 newscasts per week on a skeleton crew, and that students just weren't interested in supporting the project. And it's been a great disappointment to the people at KNW who have believed that one of the station's missions was to provide in-depth, but also topical, on the moment news for eastern New Mexico and West Texas. So I have seen this trend of students becoming less and less interested in journalism, less and less interested in being part of newscast, and being, especially since COVID, less engaged with their studies at the universities. So I did put together a panel, and this was at BEA last year. I reached out to people I knew who were really great teachers who were dedicated to engagement, and then was able to put together this roundtable, and these people came in. I just, in terms of our conversation today about journalism, about news, and about engagement, I want to share the stories of 2 very briefly. One is a faculty member at the University of Nebraska. In the past, you had to be like a junior before you ever got to participate in the newscast. They've turned that upside down. If you can walk in the door as a brand new first-year student and participate in producing news at Nebraska. And then they are also bringing in these individuals who are located fairly nearby in large cities to be a network of support for these students, so that they can see that unlike some students who are choosing not to go to college, not to major in communication or journalism, that it really matters, that it makes a difference in the community, but it can lead to a job that is satisfying and pays reasonably. So that's one thing I did here. Another person who represents Kansas State found out about food insecurity and food deserts in the state of Kansas, and working with a team of people put together an ongoing documentary series that traveled the state and put together these pieces about people who were hungry, struggling with food insecurity. And then students came and joined that group, and they became part of these documentary producing units. So at the end of the day, these people who are running at Nebraska and at Kansas State, these programs, dedicated teachers, they're interested mostly in their students staying in school, getting a degree, and being lifelong learners. I think that the state of the profession and the state of our discipline is enhanced because it is filled up with teachers who have those kinds of commitments. So I think I'll leave it there. I am hopeful. I see that students are becoming more and more engaged in projects that push them outside themselves, outside this little bubble that they've lived in since COVID. And if they can be a part of something that makes a difference in the community and is also, as I say, larger than themselves, that they can see that it is real, that they will be a part. And so I think I would like to leave it there, but I think it's so very interesting that coming as an academic here, I'm echoing the comments of the people who presented before me and talking about the need for students to be engaged and for us to continually seek to revitalize an understanding of the mission of journalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda.
Well-
I'd like to invite now Alan Vaughn, president of SimBAM.
Thanks, Bill. My name is Alan Vaughn. I'm the president of SimBAM, which is a mouthful. It's the College Media Business and Advertising Managers. We represent around 60 different schools of all varying sizes, and we help train students and professionals, and we also help network professionals. And Jackie and I talk a lot about how we can partner and what the state of the industry is. And I'm thrilled to be here to represent the business side of college media. I'm not trying to brag, but right before we got on here, I did get all our pinnacles and pacemakers done. So that's good. That's off my plate. But my background, just briefly, is in and out of newsrooms. And I realized as I moved on as a reporter that I really like being at the intersection of attention span and money. And journalism is my favorite brand of attention span. And so that's what compels me to continually find myself here in these types of, in the college media industry, in journalism in general. And anyway, I'm just really thrilled to be here. I just finished my 5th school year here at the Daily Nebraskan, which feels like 2. So I am far from an expert, but really, really thrilled to be here. If there are any, I just want to say this before we move on, if there are any schools, especially Jackie and I talk about this, there are a lot of one-person shops. There's a lot of one person doing everything. And the thing that we do the best is we can help put people at ease if they feel like they don't have the business expertise that they need. We have that resource. So if that is you, I'd love to hear from you, or to figure out, ways that we can help, and SimBAM and myself, and however, just resources. It's all about who you know and what you know type of thing. And I do want to say this, that I'm thrilled here. And I know I'm surrounded by a lot of, there's a lot of journalism here, and I am a journalist. I've worked in newsrooms and I have done that, and now I'm positioned on the outside of that. But I do really feel that we, here in college media especially, that we're going to win with journalism and relevancy, but we're going to build dynasties with business success. So I'm thrilled to be here to be able to talk about this today.
All right, I'm thrilled by all the positive emotion here. Thank you, Alan. And please welcome Ashanti Blaze Hopkins of SPJ.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashanti Blaze Hopkins, president of the Society of Professional Journalists. First, I did want to thank Jackie so much for this brainchild of coming up with these confabs. I think that this is the second one that I've done, and it's just such a great idea to kind of build community and be able to have these conversations that sometimes can be uncomfortable, but completely worth it and necessary. And so just wanted to thank you again for including me once again in these. I look forward to them. I did want to kind of start by saying, I don't know that I ever saw myself in the position that I'm sitting in right now. I started as a journalist. I was a television news anchor and reporter for 11 years. And for me, that's what I was going to do forever, right? And so, being in a position where I went from being a professional journalist to then running my own business, my own PR firm and video production company, to then entering into higher education, and being a journalism professor, and then being, you know, assistant director of student media at Loyola Marymount University, and working hands-on as an advisor for student media, both on the TV side and the newspaper side and the yearbook side. What I started to really see and care about, and what became my passion, was educating this next generation of journalists, right? So, you know, I think sitting here in this position now, where I'm also the associate dean at Santa Monica College, our Center for Media and Design, former faculty advisor of the Corso newspaper from Santa Monica College, is I see, you know, a bright light and an enthusiasm in the students that I encounter now, that even though I feel like COVID did a lot to depress that a bit, it feels like it's starting to come back. You know, it feels like that spark in our students is starting to come back. And I think the moment that I really felt like there was a turning point, two different kind of touch points for me. I had the honor of being the keynote at the ACP JACC annual convention. And the topic of my keynote was "The Fourth Estate is Now." Being in a room full of student journalists who have been talked to and been in workshops all day and spend an entire day, you know, learning and engaging and all of these things, you would think by the time they got to the keynote in the evening that they would just be deers caught in the headlights kind of looks, spacing out. And these students were engaged, they were excited. They, you know, they had 50 million different questions once my keynote speech was over. I had a line almost out the door of students that just wanted to ask questions and engage because they were excited and they felt, you know, really rejuvenated. And I think the second touch point for me was seeing, as we had the protests at campuses all across the country. And when I tell you, the best journalism and the best coverage of those stories came from campus media journalists. And I want to be very, very purposeful about me saying it in that way. I do not see student journalists as student journalists. They're journalists, full stop, period. So I have now started to refer to those journalists as journalists who are working for campus media, or campus media journalists. You know, I think we are doing them a disservice to label them simply as student journalists, because many of them are on the front lines of some of the biggest and most unprecedented stories of our history. They are alongside the same professional journalists from the New York Times, from the LA Times, you know, in many of these larger markets. And in some of these smaller markets, they're the only news media outlet covering these stories. And so I think that we have to start empowering these journalists that are working for these campus news media outlets in ways that show them you're doing the work now. This is not a situation where one of these days you're going to be this great journalist who's going to change the world or who's going to write that first draft of history. You're doing it now. And I think if we can keep kind of pouring into, you know, these college media journalists and say to them, you're doing the work. You've proven that you can do the work, and you've proven that you can continue to do the work. And you're not just the future of our industry, you are our industry. And so, you know, I'm really excited about, you know, what's coming next. Obviously, with SPJ, we have dozens of chapters across the country. They're student chapters and they're professional chapters. And I think that there is such an opportunity to make sure that we are constantly creating these touch points and blurring the lines between what is happening at campus media and what is happening at professional media. Because I think in the broad scheme of things, that's going to make our industry stronger, right? If we can start pouring into these students, even at the elementary school level, right? And building them up to the point where when they do get to the college level, it's journalism, period. And so I'm excited to kind of keep this conversation going and see how we can better support and set those college media journalists up for success, and to kind of take on the baton and keep going, because we're going to need them. You know, our industry is facing some challenges. to put it very mildly. We're going to need their energy. We're going to need their insights. We're going to need their ability to understand what a toxic environment is and what balance looks like for their lives. We're going to need all of those things if we want our industry to sustain itself. So I will leave it at that. Thanks.
You've said a lot. In fact, all of you have given us a really broad foundation for this conversation. So I'm going to ask and see if each of you can narrow it down a little bit. You've raised amazing topics, things like mental health, enrollment cliffs, censorship implied by the Gaza protest coverage, revenue sources, perhaps some of them unconventional, and so on. So I would ask each of you to focus on perhaps just one of these and see if you have a perspective or even a strategy, a potential solution for improving that particular challenge. And I'll give you a moment to think about it, but perhaps we can go in more or less the same order. Jackie, I'll look to you next.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have the answer for this. If I had the answer, I probably wouldn't be a college media advisor. I'd be a consultant and make a lot more money than I make now. But I think really first and foremost, when I think about my students, and I think about the conversations I have with advisors across the country, the number one challenge is mental health. And that seems like a really all-encompassing term. But when we think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it really does start at the very bottom of needs, of food security, of housing security. And honestly, college media has operated for a very long time on this idea of, you put in the work, you pay your dues, kind of like what we see in professional media, where you might work for a broadcast organization or for a journalism organization when you are an entry-level employee and you make 28 or 32 or less than $40,000 a year. We've kind of applied that principle to college media, where you might make $5, $10, $15 a story. Our students can't live off of that. They are facing inflation, they're facing rent hikes, they're trying to survive. And so, like, even for us at UAB, I had an editor-in-chief who was editor-in-chief of the student news outlet, was also working as a tutor for our athletics department, and was also door dashing. And so we have to have a reckoning and a real conversation about how do we change our funding model in order to support our students, so that way they are not stressed out. They're already stressed between their classes, and they're stressed about producing news very quickly, and being on all the time. And we're not paying them a living wage in order for them to meet their basic needs. So really, for me, I think mental health is a challenge. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten calls from students at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night saying like, hey, I'm suicidal, or hey, this has happened and I don't know how to deal with it. And having to call our counseling services. Really glad that we have a strong partnership with them so we can kind of move them to the top of the line. But I really want our students to be healthy and well. That is the primary for me. Like, I really would love them to be great journalists, but I want them to be great participants in our society. I want them to matriculate towards graduation. I want them to be happy, whole people. And that's really hard to do and balance when we're asking them, hey, churn this out, churn this out, churn this out, when they're worried about where their next meal might come from. When I'm walking them to our food pantry because they don't have food at home, when they're dealing with interpersonal and domestic violence at home. So yeah, I think that primarily for me, it's just supporting our students in a holistic manner.
And if I may just comment on that just for a moment, I think including in our training of the students, some kind of awareness of mental health challenges for the students to recognize mental health challenges in their peers can be a really important part of training. CMA had a session on that some years ago at one of the conventions, and I thought it was outstanding. And I think that might be something that, as a strategy, we want to continue on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're having conversations about, and I know at least one of our board members is working through at the moment.
Great, yeah.
Can I
And
add
then-
something to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please.
I was just gonna say, like, on top of that, on top of I don't know where my next meal is coming from, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my rent, they're also dealing with a lot of harassment online. Online harassment tended to be limited to professional journalists, to mainstream journalists, postgraduate journalists, but we're seeing our students face that a lot. I've talked to FIRE, and they are seeing increasing amounts of doxing and harassment of our student journalists. So they're dealing with all of these other issues, as well as being a student and trying to matriculate towards graduation. And then they have people, grown adults, that are treating them horrifically, and they don't know where to turn.
I wanted to add to that too, you know, because I think the mental health component, here's the thing, if our mental health isn't in a place where we're able to handle what's going on around us, it doesn't really matter if you're a journalist. It doesn't really matter if you're trying to be anything else, right? I think also, in addition to, as faculty advisors, as faculty in general, as administrators, as staff at a higher education institution, making sure that we're you know, treating the whole student, it's also giving our students and these journalists who are working at campus news media outlets the ability to understand when a story might be triggering for them.
Yeah.
And how are we kind of talking them through how to manage those feelings, how to, in a safe way, be able to you know, sit with what might be coming up for them. Because all of our students, all of us in this room, have childhood traumas, have situational traumas that get triggered based on what's going on in front of you. When you're covering news, that can often come up on a daily, if not hourly basis, because you're covering tough things. You're covering things that are that can affect communities that you're from. You're covering you know, stories that can impact marginalized communities, and that can have a lot of issues that come up for anyone covering those stories, whether you're at a traditional news media outlet, a digital news media outlet, or a campus news media outlet. So, you know, I think one of the things that I often would tell my students is, you know, take a second to really be in your head and ask yourself, if you're struggling with covering a story, why is that? What's going on for you? What's coming up for you? And teaching our students how to be more mindful about what's going on in here and what's going on in here, right? And having those conversations. So, for example, when a lot of the protests were popping up after the murder of George Floyd, my students, as they were covering this story, realized that there were some things that were coming up for some students as the coverage was going on that wasn't coming up for others. And so I pulled together the entire newsroom and I said, guys, we're going to talk about all of these issues. Let's just create a safe space. What's coming up for everyone? Share what you're going through. Share your experiences so others can understand why this story is so layered and so difficult. Because at the end of the day, it's going to help your coverage. And if some people need to say, I can't do this, I got to step back out of this, it's too close to me, then let them have that space, and other people who are not there can pick up the balance. And so I think it's really important for us to teach students at the college level that they can advocate for their mental health, that they can take a step back and say, I shouldn't be covering this, there's too much coming up for me, and letting them know that that's okay. And that even though that's not the newsroom environment that I came up in, it was very much, oh, well, you're going to cover this story, and whatever comes up for you, you manage that on your own time or you don't. Come back tomorrow, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
That's not a healthy way to do anything, and it's not sustainable. And we don't want to create a new generation of journalists who are getting burnt out, who are having mental health issues, who are having issues that they can't handle and manage. So I think we have to give them those tools to be able to advocate for themselves and recognize when they're in a newsroom that is toxic and they should get out, because we spend a lot of time in these newsrooms. And so if you're not in a place where you feel safe, if you're not in a place where you feel like you can advocate for those things for yourself, then maybe that's not the right fit for you, and that's okay. And so I think we have to empower our students to be able to advocate for themselves in those ways too.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you said. Just to piggyback off of that, I know it's not only advisors in here, but I really just want to encourage advisors in particular to sometimes take a step back and listen to what your students are saying, particularly about story coverage. We all probably came up in newsrooms where you just covered it, and we all can probably describe the ways that wasn't always healthy for us. We had a tragic accident here, 4 students died, and it was a real moment for me to understand how this generation, they actually know how to advocate for themselves. We have to learn how to listen, step back. They are allowed to question and even push back on the conventions of journalism. They are allowed to do it differently. There are good questions that we can raise and help them think through. But if we are doing our jobs right, they are going to question the way things are being done, have been done. Let's do it differently. Breaking news isn't always breaking news, or sometimes it is when others think it isn't. And so I really encourage us all. Sometimes our jobs as advisors, often actually, let me say, our jobs as advisors is to take a step back and listen, and then figure out the best way to support them based on how they see the story. We can raise questions. We can, come back around to things, but I think we just need to do a better job listening, because this generation does know how to advocate for themselves. At least that's my experience. They're just not often heard because people aren't listening. So that would be what I would add to that response.
And let's pay attention to the fact too that our organizations don't deal just with journalism. We deal with literary fiction and poetry and all kinds of other multimedia projects. And teachers of writing and literature often pay attention to the content of those stories to see any signs of things like mental illness, harassment, assault, issues that are coming up and affecting the students' lives. I think all of us as advisors would do well to pay attention to that content and be inquisitive. I'd like to invite any of the others if you have time, like to offer something.
I'd like to pick up on what you've just said about the artistic voice. Well, first of all, one of the classes that I teach is first year, first semester, public speaking and introduction to communication. And I have found that with those students, even if you just open a space for them to talk about their lives, they're going to talk about mental health. And then the conversation is just incredibly dynamic. So as a part of that, I actually have started a magazine, an arts magazine at my university. And so what we're finding is that students are encouraged to write personal essays and poetry, develop short stories. And I think that this does satisfy a need, I think, for all of us, but certainly at my university, to start where the students are. So if they're not interested in covering some kind of news event, but they are interested in talking about their own grief or their pain, or even just working with animals, there's a lot of joy in our students' lives as well, but they need a venue in which to produce those. I would like to say that in terms of financial, which I see as a problem, there's just not enough money to do all the things that we need to do for our students. I do think that it would be interesting to think about inviting students to be part of a fundraising project, to be part of a team or a unit, let them put together the rationale, the mission, and the meanings, and then go forward to speak with people in the community who are actually really interested in what I think academics are doing and what the students are feeling and the financial needs. Bankers care, realtors care. They just have to be asked, and they have to be asked by someone who can make the claim. And so I'm actually going to bring that forward to our dean and see if perhaps we can help students become a part of a project that helps them participate in fundraising, developing the arguments, meeting the people, but doing it for a project that really matters to them. Thank you.
Really what I want to add, Shanti, you talked about culture. Jackie, you're talking about culture. Elizabeth, you're talking about challenging the conventions. I am obsessed with organizational behavior, which is like a nerdy thing to say out loud in front of a bunch of people. But I think that it's important to this conversation, especially when institutional knowledge lasts a year and a half tops, right? Yeah. Like constantly redefining that is one thing that we're trying to push forward, and we'll see. I'm still new to the college media thing, but trying to at least say, what do you want it to be? And Elizabeth, to your point about their self-advocating, they know how to do this, and maybe it's on us to have to figure that out. I just want them to be in a space that that they're comfortable with and that they can do the work. And then maybe we fill in the blanks a little bit about, well, not everything we used to do was good, but here are a few things we don't want to lose track of, right? And so then together, in harmony, we're able to figure that out and push each other. And so I very much believe in that. And Glenda, you are speaking my love language, and you're talking about fundraising and money and those types of things. That when I took this job, instantly knew advertising is weird, student fees or school funding or whatever is double weird and volatile, and really trying to be entrepreneurial in the way that you're thinking about where the money is coming from. And and Glenn, I'm glad you're saying that to anyone who their department or whatever their situation is, right? I just learned at a conference that 53 of 500 plus college media programs are independent 501c3s. We are one of those. I thought there were a lot more of those, and there are not. That I'm actually in the minority of that. And so what that has kind of changed my frame on this, which is figure out, and maybe your boss, if you're the boss, try to figure it out. If you're not the boss, try to figure out what your relationship with the foundation is, or with fundraising is, and just fight like hell for yourself. And then, boy, I do the majority of our fundraising. But man, our people would much rather hear from the students, right? Like that's what it's all about. And so trying to figure that part out is that's what our number one cause goes to, is to making sure students have the same experience they had because it shaped their lives. Like that is the most powerful thing that we can do. So fundraising is not easy, and it's very difficult because rich people get real shy about their money real fast around, things that, man, I'm not really for sure. But just trying to be there for them and be consistent with them and build a system out of that is very, very difficult. And it's very hard. I will say the two things we've talked about so far, if we do fundraising and mental health, I didn't go to training for either one of those. So I think also there's, give yourselves a lot of grace for how you're handling this. And then as you are building your own personal board of directors and resources, is then going and trying to find people who can help you with that. Because people expect us to have the answers. We don't have all of those answers. When we've got Jackie, whatever Jackie you were talking about with going to the food pantry and talking to students, like that may be in the job description, but that is not like in the first couple of bullet points of skill, right? And so, kudos to anyone who is dealing with that as an advisor or whatever their role is. But trying to really be there for them is difficult for us also. And just being as prepared as we can for that is important. But the money, the fundraising, is, you're exactly right, Glenda, is And I would just say, just be as entrepreneurial as possible and trying to figure out where you can turn a buck from somewhere, because as much as, and we are doing better at making money off our journalism product, but we make the majority of our money from non-journalism situations. So.
Yeah, so Alan, you alluded to the kinds of training that advisors don't get. What new skills do you think advisors of college media today are most in need of beyond those two?
I hope you're not asking me to put me on the spot. I'll let anyone else please answer.
I'll put it out to the group.
Thank you.
Well, I'll jump in here. I've actually done quite a lot of published research on this. So I don't know if it's a skill, but I think that maybe it's a soft skill. So I'll put it that way. So the technology is going to continue to change, and advisors should try to stay up on that, and really good engagement strategies and all of that. But the most recent paper that we published on this was called "Keeping the Lights On and the Wolves Outside." And that was the idea that advisors hold this liminal role where you are part of the community, but you're also really an advocate for the community. And I think that more than ever, advisors really have to be extremely well-versed on First Amendment law and how this applies to your campus. Because we all know, oftentimes it is a conversation that the advisor is having with somebody else on campus or off campus that is going to play a critical role in access, because administrators, I'll just say generally, not only speaking for my campus, quite honestly, often don't care about how the First Amendment affects the role of student media and the access that it's given. And they'll continue to challenge it to sort of gatekeep access, even when it's legally protected by the Constitution, even when it's protected by state law. So I think that this ability to be able to advocate and fight for your students, especially in the legal realm, I actually think it has escalated so much in the last few years. It's not new. This has always existed. I think it will continue to escalate in ways that we probably can't envision. And then the other part of it is, I think advisors need to be really invested in the conversation around AI and how AI will play pivotal roles, and not to replace, of course, any of our journalists, but the ways that our journalists are going to be using AI in ethical ways. So that would be the two areas I would suggest.
Do any others come to mind? Those are big ones.
I would say, one of the things that when I became an advisor initially that I had probably zero training in was how to help students better understand organizational leadership, right? And how do you build those structures? I think one of the hardest and most challenging things for students to do is to manage their peers. So, really making sure that you have a really good understanding of how to teach organizational leadership in ways that feel not overwhelming, because it's a lot. It's a lot to run any kind of an organization. It's a lot to run a newsroom. And in some of our campuses, the staff is not paid. They're volunteers. It's part of a class. So, getting those folks motivated to do the thing, and, getting folks motivated to create the content on a regular basis. So I think, making sure that advisors have the knowledge and the pedagogical skills to be able to, impart to students how best to kind of think about organizational leadership and all of these different kind of forms of leadership and what that might look like for each person. And, getting students to a place where they're not just thinking about the journalism, but there's this whole other side of a newsroom that is really rooted in the business side of things. And, if that's not handled correctly, it can impact the content, and it can impact, how your newsroom is able to cover communities in ways that that does not impart harm. And so I think those areas are also would be very beneficial for advisors to really kind of focus on when they're thinking about professional development, when they're thinking about growth as advisors in general. I think those areas are really, really critical, for students.
Not too long ago, there was seems like it was a nationwide trend where journalism departments were being absorbed into marketing or mass comm, and some of them were being blended and dissolved in some way or another. I'm wondering, what are your perspectives on that today? What opportunities or challenges does that present college media broadly?
I think I can speak on this just a little bit. So prior to working at UAB, I worked at Clemson University. We were, we were under student affairs, and created our own kind of media conglomerate between our 7 organizations. I want to say probably less than a year after I departed Clemson to come to UAB, they basically dissolved the organizations and they put them in with comm studies. I think there's a lot of benefit for being aligned with academics, but there's also a lot of challenges there. We see that, even at UAB with trying to make sure that the goals of what our faculty partners are looking for align directly with our students, and what their goals are. I think there's a lot of benefit for authentic partnerships. And when I say partnerships, I think a lot of times we talk about collaboration as one of our core values in our division. But honestly, the collaboration can be, hey, I need to use your space or I need to use your equipment, but really having, critical conversations about these are our goals, these are your goals, how do we marry them and make sure that we both get to the space that we're trying to get to, is really paramount. Not sure if they answered the question, but that's where I went.
There's no one model that you can point to say this is like the perfect model. And every campus looks a little bit different in how they manage their campus media. What I would say is, whether your structure is that you're under student affairs or whether you're under an academic program, there has to be an agreed upon understanding that student media is student led. I think that it can exist well and flourish under a lot of different models, as long as it's clear that student media is not faculty media with students who are doing the legwork, or faculty who are editors. It has to be student-led media. So ours is in an academic program, but we have clear language and mission around our student media.
So I can speak to a situation that I encountered at the University of New Mexico involving the Lobo, which is a newspaper. It is an independent entity. It raises its own money. It hires its own people, and all of those students who work for the paper come from English, political science, communication, journalism, and others, business. So we had a new president, and the Lobo had a cartoonist who would poke fun at the new president, and he was very upset. And he came to me and he told me that I had to shut that down, that they could no longer participate in this cartoon. And so, of course, the cartoons continued for some time after that. So the students rightly believed that they had a constitutional right to make this critique. Our department stood up for them on that, as did the English department, as did people who had worked for the Lobo as students who were journalists in the community. And so the fact that this newspaper is independent and fights to maintain that, I think has been a benefit to the campus at UNM, and certainly to the Lobo.
Thank you. We're about at the top of the hour, but this is a lively conversation. I was wondering if we might just pitch one or two more issues. And one is that we're seeing a new wave of censorship coming about because of a lot of the coverage of Gaza. I'm wondering, what would your recommendations be to advisors about how to approach that?
I mean, there's a part of me that feels like we have an entire First Amendment that helps us and can serve as our guide when it comes to how we should approach this. I think at the end of the day, we have to advocate for our students and making sure that higher education officials are very clear that they are just as protected by the First Amendment as any other journalist in this country. And we cannot start to chip away at that, because that becomes dangerous. And so, to me, the First Amendment is always my North Star. If I am seeing that, higher education officials are coming after my students and the ways in which they are doing so violate the First Amendment, I'm going to push back, and I'm going to push back loudly. And I'm likely going to pull together a coalition of some folks to say the things that need to be said. So I think knowing the laws, and this goes to a point that Elizabeth made earlier, knowing what the law is, knowing what the protections that your students have is important, because it's hard to advocate for them when these things happen unless you know what their protections actually are and you know where the law is clear. And so, I mean, to me, use the First Amendment as your first star.
Yeah,
Your North Star, excuse me, not your first star, your North Star.
Honestly, I want to thank our partners. Ashanti has been a fierce voice on Twitter, the platform now known as X, and with a coalition of organizations. Elizabeth and ACP have been great. SPLC and FIRE have been fantastic. When we're seeing our student journalists arrested during these Gaza encampments and speaking out and speaking loudly in support of our students. I think a college media advisor job is honestly quite lonely. Most of the time, you're the only one. And it's a very unique position where you are employed by the institution, but you're also advocating for students that are holding the institution to account. And so being able to work with our partners between SPJ, ACP, FIRE, SPLC to provide backup to these advisors has been honestly really a seminal moment for me as an advisor over the last month and a half with these Gaza encampments. I am concerned with the erosion of not just student journalists and their rights, but also the erosion of student protesters and their rights on these campuses. I'll be honest, it was really horrifying, dismaying seeing, tweet after tweet, video after video for weeks of our students. They're taught to hold people accountable. They're taught that the social change model is to speak up to power. We have taught them these things as students, and when they enact that in their world, the place where they may or may not feel safe, the place that they call home, and to see police turn on them was honestly really horrifying. So I am concerned about the continued erosion of First Amendment rights for all of our students that is being justified by university administrators, university leadership, as this is a time, manner, and place enforcement, changing those rules at the last second in order to arrest these students, and finding our student journalists caught up in the middle of that. I have a running I have a running text message with Josh Moore at the Student Press Law Center. We've been going back and forth constantly of like, okay, well, this just happened. Do we need to write a statement about this? This just happened at this school. And we're still seeing that now, even with the Stanford Daily, just, yesterday, I want to say that was yesterday. And Ashanti, you spoke out on that. I appreciate it. That we are seeing so many of our students that are being impacted by administrators that are attempting to avoid inquiry from, quite honestly, our government. And they're erasing students' ability to exercise their First Amendment rights.
Jackie, you
Yeah,
said
I would just tack on. Oh, I'm sorry,
no,
Alan, just
no,
from the
Elizabeth. Go.
from the private school perspective, I'm at a private institution. I know Peg is in here. She's at a private institution. I'm sure a lot of us are. You have to be very vigilant. In California, private schools are lucky that we have a lot of protection for First Amendment rights. Not every state does, but when we get a new comms team at Pepperdine, or a new vice president of whatever, I make it a point to set up a meeting with them. And I also share with them the Leonard Law and other things. And I cannot tell you how many times someone has said to me, what now? When we're talking about the Leonard Law, which is a state protection, or so you have to know your case law. You have to educate your students. Time, place, and manner, even for the students who aren't taking our First Amendment media law classes, we go over that. So it just arming yourself, because oftentimes it's not going to stop, when the police are coming into protests, but it can be really helpful if a student can cite case law. It sometimes puts people off and they're surprised, and it can help move the needle on access. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No, I'm glad you said that, because really all I was gonna say is, that's such good advice, and I've thought of that, but I've never heard it quite that way. And then I heard Doria from UCLA speak at a conference recently, and she was talking about their situation. Everyone's situation was a little different, and everyone's case law is going to be a little different. And the toughest thing to do in the moment is be like, well, hello, other 500 people in CMA. Here's best practice, right? But I do think that if there is any time to be able to jot down a few thoughts, hey, have we done this? And that's so hard in the moment. I know Fire and Josh and Gary and all of them at SPLC are doing that. But just to be able to help each other in those situations, I think makes this network can be really, really powerful in a way that's like, or just identifying different people, following people on Twitter and seeing what's going on and reaching out and just opening those channels. But that can be really powerful, because I don't know necessarily, we brought in protest experts to talk or whatever, a protest expert, but how to cover protests and things like that. But it changes so fast. And then what we're actually seeing on the ground sometimes is not even what maybe those experts have seen before. So just trying to constantly have those conversations and talking and finding people who are in it is just so powerful. And I really appreciate this group in further widening that.
A question came in. I realize it's getting late, but I just wonder if anybody wanted to very briefly touch upon this question from Peg. What are you doing about general recruitment? Their numbers are getting alarmingly low. Can't even fill editing spots right now. Any quick tips on recruitment?
I can throw some out. I will say it's so interesting. Our recruitment, our numbers increased because of COVID, and then they stayed there. It was odd. I was expecting it to do the opposite, but we were happy to see it. But I will say this, one of the things that we started to do was to reach out to other disciplines where we knew that these are roles within a newsroom, right? So graphic designers, even animators, put folks from the marketing side, folks from the entrepreneurship program, like, what tangential programs do you have at your institution where you can start to pull students in? We pulled in students from the film program, like, hey, we need videographers. We need people that know how to tell a good story. We need people who know how to edit really well. So reaching out to those programs and giving them an opportunity to say, look, this is an opportunity for you to start to use the skills you're learning in practical ways that can help you add to a portfolio that can get you a job. And I think that has been really, really helpful with us. Also, if there's ever any kind of like welcome day that you're having or any kind of club day that you're having, making sure that you have a presence there on a regular basis, making sure that you have some newspapers in hand or a QR code like we have where people can scan it and it goes directly to our issue so people can see what we're doing on a regular basis. So that's been very helpful in us being able to get the word out that like, we want you to come over here. And I know that maybe you're not a journalism major or that's not something that you might be interested in, but there's all these other roles that help to tell content and help to create content and tell stories that we need. So we need you. And I think we've had a lot of success with that. Some of our best former EICs were biology majors or like physics majors. But because they had, a skill set of being able to research and take that research in and communicate it in a way that was easily understandable and digestible to an audience, that meant that they had skills that we needed. So that's one thing that's been really beneficial for at least the program that I'm
Exactly
connected
right.
to.
I was working at the Des Moines Register, and we used to say, oh, we've got a year and a half with these new hires. And it was really 9 months because we were teaching them the transferable skills so then they go make more money somewhere else. So obviously we need to fix that. But it is, David said it in the chat, it's very much transferable skills. It's very much because the newsroom is so much more. I want an army of people who can code and do journalism, right? Like, of course, everybody does, but that's what I want. And so being able to try to figure out how to find those people, our number one recruiting tool is still just going to classrooms. It's so funny, but now we need to change the classrooms that we go to, right? Like now we need to go to the innovation, whatever, the Johnny Carson Innovation School. Like we need to go to these, like they need to change that. And I'm hopeful, I'm always pushing them. They're like, well, we know English works and we know that this works. So they only have so much time, but that's been the number one thing for us. COVID killed our numbers and we are building it back. The good news is that the people who graduate, who were freshmen during that first COVID year, did not get plugged in on our campus, but everyone else outside of that is like dying to do something, like just thirsty to do something. And so we're trying to give them a place because I think we can all say this, our stuff is super fun. Like you can get if you can get mission, vision, values plugged into their brain, a little bit of rebelliousness, we're going to get you a job. Like that's a winning formula. So I feel like we just need to tell the story in better places.
I will just add, we also, like Ashanti's program, we broke our participation record in COVID. I think because students were looking for a place to plug in a way that they hadn't had to look before, or there were fewer places to plug in. So what I want to say about that is all of that. I agree with everything that you guys have said about making sure it's intentional at club days and all of that. But one thing that we've tried to do is like our TikTok, we actually use our TikTok mostly for showing like what's happening in the newsroom, which is usually like the crazy production nights or like, the one night a semester we get to order food or whatever. And so the students who see us there are actually seeing what the community up here is like. Of course, there's so much more to it. But I do think for students who might be mildly interested, but also are looking for community, that's a kind of a way of soft recruiting that builds engagement, but also may end up in students up in the newsroom.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we have done, honestly, even pre-COVID, have heard from all of our organizations that recruitment was one of their top 3 goals. But when it came down to it, the efforts when it came to recruitment, kind of weighed against content creation, recruitment fell by the wayside. So what we did was we created a recruitment manager position that's a departmental support position. Their entire job is just to focus on getting new people in for all 3 of our organizations. And they also do tracking of, okay, well, these folks filled out the interest form. These folks matriculated to membership. the folks that are in the gap there that didn't move from interest to membership, we're going to do an exit survey with them and get more information as to why they may or may not have joined. Is it because they were too busy? They realized that their, coursework was too heavy, or they just didn't hear from us. There was radio silence from the organizations. And that's been something that we use in our year-to-year annual assessment, saying that, 42% of our interests, matriculated into membership, and these are the reasons why they didn't actually become members. So having someone that is a paid student that is solely focused on going to those fairs, that's going to those classes, that is working with our social media manager to do online recruitment campaigns has been really helpful.
So I can speak to something that I see is also popping up in the chat, and that is that we have, every year now we have Communication Day. It starts early, goes late. We bring in people from the community. We host a lunch. We have guest speakers, and we focus on student work, and we ask the students to come and act as recruiters at this event. And we have seen that this is helping us just edge up. And in the School of Arts and Sciences last year, communication led all of the departments in terms of percentage growth. And I really do believe that it is just this effort to sort of reach out to people who don't know anything about the department, don't know anything about the discipline, but we had esports there. They were just, people were so excited, and they all joined esports, and now there's a national record for this team. But what we did was just grow the major. That was the focus of the Communication Day, not to grow the BEA club, not to grow the film club, but just a holistic approach toward growing the numbers of students in the major.
Mhm.
But I do see that a lot of people in the chat have had some success in similar kinds of activities.
Mhm.
Kind of
Well-
old school promotion, actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. I want to sincerely thank Ashanti and Jackie and Alan, Elizabeth and Glenda for taking time out of your busy days to do this. This has really been valuable. If those of you who are participating did not get a chance to answer, have a question answered, or if you'd like to offer a comment, please post it to the CMA listserv. I'm sure that you'll get dozens of responses within minutes. I'd like to close by saying that I hope you found this conversation useful, and looking ahead to upcoming confabs. On August 12th, although that day may shift a little bit, Elizabeth Smith will be back to present on that ever-relevant subject of assessment and the use of CAS standards. Then on September 12th, we'll have Sri Srinivasan, a researcher, technology journalist, an influential thinker in his field, presenting on artificial intelligence as it applies to our work. Sri will follow that up with an open forum in November called Throw Things at Sri, where he'll answer your most burning questions about AI in our professional lives. So please watch for announcements of these these events in the CMA listserv. Mark your calendars. And once again, thank you all sincerely for attending. I wish you all a restful and rejuvenating summer. We'll see you in August. Cheers.